Why Patrick Stewart hated Picard's pet lionfish in Star Trek. The Next Generation. Few icons in science fiction are as meticulously composed as Captain Jean-Luc Picard. Every detail of the character, from his crisp diction to his minimalist quarters, helped shape the commanding, dignified persona that defined Star Trek. The Next Generation for 7 seasons. So when the show introduced Livingston, Picard subtly named Lionfish, fans might have assumed the captain's pet was just another carefully chosen piece of set dressing. But behind the scenes, the lionfish became one of the most unexpected and funniest sources of frustration for Patrick Stewart. What seemed like a harmless aquarium prop turned into a creative headache, an aesthetic eyesore, and even a running inside joke among the cast and crew. And so begins one of Trek's most peculiar production stories. The saga of Patrick Stewart versus the lionfish. Livingston. A symbol with more problems than purpose, Livingston first appeared in Picard's quarters midway through TNG's run, sometimes fully visible in the background, sometimes quietly bubbling away behind the captain as he dispensed eloquent wisdom. The idea was simple. Give Picard a pet that reveals something about his personality, instead of a dog or a cat. The captain of the Federation flagship owns an exotic, serene creature that reflects his philosophical side. The writers imagined this aquarium as a visual cue that Picard's quarters were his sanctuary, a place as tranquil as the fish inside it. But there was one massive issue. No one thought to ask the actor how he felt about it. Patrick Stewart, known for his Shakespearean gravitas and precise understanding of visuals, was not thrilled. The aquarium and the lionfish inside it became a distraction for him. The tank gave off light that distorted shots. The bubbling sound interfered with line delivery, and the enormous setup made navigating around the set a chore. Stewart didn't hate Livingston because of the fish itself. He hated everything around it. The practical headaches, lights, noise, and chaos. One of Stewart's biggest complaints about the lionfish setup was the lighting. The tank required illumination from multiple angles, and on a television set already filled with bright lights, this caused glare that cinematographers constantly had to adjust for. Scenes in Picard's quarters, which were supposed to feel intimate, sometimes took longer to shoot because of reflections bouncing off the tank glass. The noise from the filtration system was another issue. Anyone who's ever owned an aquarium knows that pumps and bubbles are not silent. Stewart prided himself on his careful vocal delivery, so the subtle drone of the lionfish tank was an irritant. The problem wasn't loud, but it was persistent, just enough to distract him when delivering weighty dialogue about diplomacy, philosophy, or the Prime Directive. The tank also took up a large portion of the room, creating a logistical dilemma. Picard's quarters set wasn't huge. Every inch had been designed with that late 80s futuristic minimalism in mind. The aquarium disrupted that aesthetic flow and forced Stewart to carefully maneuver around it. Sometimes during dramatic scenes that required blocking he believed should feel natural and fluid. And, perhaps most hilariously, Stewart often claimed the tank felt like a prop that had more presence than he did. It didn't help that Livingston was bright, colorful, and constantly moving, hard to ignore even in scenes where the fish wasn't supposed to draw attention. Character consistency. What would Picard really keep in his quarters? Beyond the technical problems, Stewart simply didn't think the lionfish fit Picard's character. Picard was a deeply contemplative man who spent his downtime reading Shakespeare, playing the Ressican flute, or practicing archaeology. He was famously private and intentionally minimalist. So, Stewart argued, why on earth or beyond would this disciplined captain keep an exotic, high-maintenance fish? In interviews and behind-the-scenes anecdotes from cast members, Stewart reportedly pushed back on the decision, saying it felt like writers were forcing personality onto Picard instead of allowing the character to develop naturally. Even if the intention was to show Picard's softer side, Stewart thought the gesture was out of character, and the lionfish felt like an unnecessary attempt at adding quirkiness. Writers eventually toned down Livingston's appearances. The fish became an infrequent presence rather than a recurring feature. Whether this was due to Stewart's complaints or simply creative choices is debatable, but the timing is suspicious. The running joke among the crew. As frustration grew, the crew leaned into the absurdity of the lionfish drama. Livingston started popping up in unexpected crew conversations, Directors teased Stewart by telling him, "Let's make sure Livingston gets good coverage." Makeup artists joked about making the fish photo ready. The cast occasionally asked about Livingston's emotional well-being as if it were a real diva on set. Marina Sirtis counselor Troy reportedly joked that Livingston should have gotten his own trailer. Michael Dorn Worf suggested that if the lionfish ever escaped its tank, he would consider it a worthy opponent. Even Jonathan Frakes found ways to lean into the humor, giving comically dramatic directions about ensuring Livingston's safety during action scenes. The fish became, unintentionally, a mascot, not for the show, but for the ridiculous behind-the-scenes struggles that come with world-building. Fans loved Livingston more than Stewart did. Ironically, while Stewart disliked the aquarium, fans adored it. Livingston became an Easter egg, a curiosity, even a meme decades before memes formally existed. Fans pointed out continuity errors in the fish's size, movement, or tank placement between episodes. Some claimed the lionfish was symbolic, representing Picard's isolation, his introversion, or his contemplative nature. Others jokingly insisted Livingston was secretly the Enterprise's true captain. The fish gained such a fandom following that when Picard returned to Star Trek in the 2009 reboot film universe, some fans campaigned for a cameo from Livingston's descendant. It never happened, but the sentiment showed how much pop culture had embraced this seemingly trivial prop. The dramatic end of Livingston. When Star Trek Generations rolled around, the writers delivered an infamous scene that may have pleased Stewart more than anyone else. When the Enterprise decrashes, Picard's quarters, and presumably Livingston's tank, are destroyed. The implication is clear. The lionfish meets an unfortunate end off-screen. Fans were split between mourning the symbolic pet and suspecting Stewart might have popped champagne behind the scenes. Stewart never openly celebrated Livingston's demise, but he also didn't hide his relief that the lionfish saga had ended. For all its symbolism, Livingston's presence in TNG was surprisingly short-lived in the big picture. Yet its legacy endured, not because of what it meant to the story, but because of what it meant to the actor who had to share screen space with it. Stewart's perspective, not hatred, but artistic preference. Patrick Stewart is famously thoughtful about every detail of performance. His frustrations with Livingston weren't emotional, they were professional. The tank made his job harder. The aesthetic didn't align with his interpretation of Picard, and some of the creative choices surrounding the fish felt distracting rather than purposeful. In reality, Stewart didn't hate Livingston. He hated what Livingston represented, an overly elaborate set piece that interfered with character consistency and the logistics of filming. But Patrick Stewart disliked the lionfish setup in Picard's quarters. Isn't nearly as catchy as Patrick Stewart hated Picard's pet lionfish.